I've been a cannabis attorney for the past 10 years. I've actually been in the cannabis industry, I say, for about 25 years. I was a U.S. government regulator, that's the polite way, so you don't boo me, of saying I was in the DEA. I was a commander for a DEA task force in my early days. That's right. So I come from that background and have now fully transitioned my entire career and practice into making your industry, your business successful. So it's a pleasure to introduce these two gentlemen. Rodney, as I practices right here in Cape Town. He is with a law firm, and I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit. But he knows everything that you're going to want to know. So we'll answer some questions at the end. Try to make sure we have enough time left for questions. So this is about $20,000 an hour of free legal expertise sitting here. So get out your free questions. This is the only time you're going to get to ask a cannabis lawyer free of charge, unless you buy me a drink later tonight, and I'll tell you all about it. And Ricky, and Rodney, everything. So please start and introduce ours.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rodney Africa. I'm a partner at Wentzel. And unfortunately, Charles, sorry, I don't have all the answers. It's a learning curve for everybody. So that's me.
Awesome, thanks, Rodney. Ricky, tell us about yourself.
Molweni. My name's Ricky Stone. I'm from the Eastern Cape. I practiced law for 10 years. I'm currently taking a bit of a sabbatical. So I'm the in-house legal counsel for the Southern Sky Group at Goodleaf. And I've also founded my own legal consultancy called Stone Conscious Legal Minds, which focuses on socially responsible brands, particularly in the cannabis industry.
Gentlemen, I was often asked when I was actively engaged in cannabis law what the local loopholes are. How do we find a loophole to get from where the industry is now legally to where we all know that it's going? How do you tell? Rodney, why don't you start with, how do you describe that for a client? How do you advance a client's interests in cannabis where it's still so undeveloped? We don't even know all the answers yet. It's vague, it's complicated. How do you help those clients?
Charles, to answer the question, and I think we had a discussion earlier, and Ricky, you must help me out here. From where I sit and the current clients that we advise, you can have an inventive interpretation in respect of our current legal framework. However, if we advise, obviously, investors and big corporates or anybody that wants to enter the market, at this stage, our advice is to follow a very conservative approach. Specifically so, unfortunately, as we all know, cannabis is not legalized. The use of it has been decriminalized, and that's it. Otherwise, we have a very strict legal framework that by and large only speak towards medical usage, and it is highly regulated. So from where we sit is, in particular in South Africa, where the moral compass in respect of cannabis is what it is, we have our regulators following a very strict interpretation of the current regulatory framework. So to the extent we need to protect a client's investment, we follow a very conservative route, and that is also the advice that we normally give. If you want the inventive interpretations and you are happy to take that risk, that is obviously upon you. However, we've been in situations, in fact earlier in this year, where if it wasn't for the specific intervention and a specific inventive interpretation at the time, they had problems with the regulators. There was a difference of opinion. And if we were not able, if it hasn't been sorted out, it would have meant the end of the brand, the business, and the entire investment. So what I've learned through that experience is having regard to the current way our regulators is looking at this, rather follow a conservative and a stricter application of them. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, very good. Ricky, tell me a little bit about taking your sabbatical from the active practice of law and now working for one client. You're in-house, you're laser focused on that client's needs. What's the difference there? What is the difference for you as an attorney, practicing from a wide variety of client needs to one whose your sole focus is to help them succeed as a lead industrialist in this new industry?
Thanks, Charles. Yes, very pertinent question. It's come with its own challenges, but for me it was exciting. I've invested at least the last 10 years of my professional career, I'd probably say the last 15 years of my life into cannabis and the plant, particularly coming from the Eastern Cape. It's a cultural thing to me. So to have a company like Southern Sky and the Goodleaf that have amazing intentions to build this industry, develop it in South Africa, but by starting at the bottom. So by including those that have been formerly in the illicit sector, starting there and building an industry around that. So for me, I took on that challenge because it's important from a regulatory point of view that we don't make the same mistakes as, say, the Americans and Canada have made, you know? I mean, at the end of the day, TIA, this is Africa, so we need an African approach to cannabis laws. So I aim to assist Goodleaf bring that forward.
How have you seen the sort of foreign approach? So I think you bring a great point. The EU, the Americans, the Canadians, everyone has their own experience, their own idea as to what this industry should look like or turn out to be for Africa. How do you approach that differently as a practitioner?
Well, various ways. Look, there are specific challenges to Africa. Not only do we have a cannabis culture, so it's ingrained. There's a lot of rural farmers, which I think is different to other jurisdictions in the world. But a big lesson, and it comes down to regulating compounds or cannabinoids. So by legislating CBD, for instance, you know, so just tracking what's happened in the States and the big pushback from the regulators there in respect of CBD being used in foodstuffs and beverages, it's almost a case that the horse is bolted, but not really, because it's in conflict with the law. So I'm seeing that we're having those same challenges in South Africa. So you have government maybe pushing too quickly to bring CBD to industry, and they don't realize the impact that that has on perhaps other legislation outside of the medicines framework. So for example, then, if CBD is lawful and exempt from a schedule, what about CBN or CBG? They technically still Schedule 7 substances, they're part of the cannabis plant. So those are specific dangers I find.
Luckily in America we can't spell that far ahead, so we're still only on CBD. So you got lots of time.
I guess so. But perhaps more importantly for me also is a lot of the speakers have spoken and will speak in depth about hemp. Now, when you bring hemp, I prefer to call it industrial cannabis. I believe that's what it is. When you bring that to Africa, the plant grows differently here. So, I mean, the cannabis plant has THC as part of its DNA. So regardless of the fact that your cultivars now, registered cultivars for hemp, are below international thresholds, once that seed gets put in African soil and grows, when you harvest it, it's no longer hemp because the THC is now above that threshold. So for me, that's something I'm very interested in watching how our government handles that.
Rodney, you've told me before when we were talking, there's no one size answer. There's no one size fits all kind of answer to your legal approach to the regulatory market. As you're advising your clients, as they're navigating this very complicated and complex beginning industry. And tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and how you advise your clients when it comes to that.
Yeah. And Charles, maybe I haven't introduced myself that good. I'm not as lucky as Rick is to be on a sabbatical. I've been in the trade for the past 25 years, unfortunately, for all my sins. And I've been in the regulatory work, administrative and public law, constitutional space, having advised one of our, blue chips, in particular in the liquor industry as well. And funny enough, my first introduction to the cannabis space was pursuant to advice sought by one of our blue chips who initially wanted to infuse liquor, which was a worldwide trend prior to the Prince judgment at the time. So when Charles asked me what do you tell clients to take away, and I think the one thing from what I've learned is that one shoe does not fit all. What I mean by that is you must know your product, the use of it, what the intended use of it would be, and what it will be actually used for. That's on the one side, but on the other side is also the active ingredients. And what I mean by that is that even though you can pigeonhole your product within the cannibal, in the Medicines Act, read with the Drugs Act, which currently regulates our cannabis framework, depending on what your product, the end product is, it will trigger other regulatory or other legislation as well. So for instance, if it's a foodstuff, it will trigger the regulations pursuant to the Foodstuffs Act. If it is a medicine, it will obviously trigger the regulations that you need to comply in respect of the Medicines Act as well. In certain instances, it can be both. If it's a liquor product, you must also comply with the Liquor Products Act, in addition to the Foodstuffs Act. So that is the kind of, so I think one shoe doesn't fit all. And then in addition to that, depending on whether you're exporting or importing, whether you're importing some of the raw products, you must also comply, obviously, with those statutory obligations as well. For instance, customs. We had a situation where the product was there, and obviously the authorities asked, but where did you get the seed from? So have your documentation ready, have your certificates, your analytic certificates ready for purposes of import, and you can give it to them. That will tell them immediately it's below what the active THC content is or whatever the case may be. But the point is, one shoe doesn't fit all, and you need not only to pigeonhole your product only in that framework, but it triggers, depending on what the ultimate usage of it, other regulations and legislation as well.
Great. Ricky, tell me about interacting with government regulators. You've had some personal experience in dealing with the sort of enforcement types from various African governments. How is that experience, and how is that translated into how you advise your client now?
I really have to think about this. I don't know many people that have had pleasant experiences dealing with government, particularly when they're attorneys and your clients are maybe on the wrong side of the law. So, look, I mean, the beginning days, probably the last 5 years, have been a battle, particularly on behalf of the farmers in Amapondo, which you would have seen come through in that short video earlier. But now it's actually a lot of fun. It's more encouraging because in this country, particularly in the Eastern Cape province, our premier now has the political will. So it's actually been very vocal about it, going as far as writing columns in the local newspapers in his personal capacity about how important cannabis is to the development of this country, but particularly the Eastern Cape province. So it's actually become largely enjoyable, for lack of better words, to now deal with government. And they're very supportive, and I think that is going to make the difference to cannabis policy in Africa, is because we've got politicians in this country that have seen the lights and have the political will, which is the most important, to see it through.
Awesome. Progress. Do we have time for one question?
Yeah.
Well, anybody got a question? I got free legal advice for you right here. No one is offering that here, by the way, today.
All right, state your name and question, please.
All right.
Hi, I'm Etienne. Hello, everybody. Thank you to organizers and to CannaTech for coming to Cape Town, the city of good dope. The one question I want to ask is probably one that's deeply rooted within the community and the sort of like darker, shadowy areas where a lot of other side of the law, like you mentioned, people are trying to take a piece or get involved in the regulated market and competing. Legally speaking, historical arrests, those kind of things for people that have had interactions with cannabis, how will that impact your sort of ranking to then get a license or to then make sure that you are abiding by the other regulations?
That's a great question.
If it's legal now, what do we do about folks that were doing stuff when it wasn't legal?
Sure, great question, thank you. So, as you know, South Africa has a medical framework. There were draft regulations that were published in 2017, and they specifically included a bar on any person with an interest, be they employee, director of the applicant, having any criminal record specifically related to cannabis. So on behalf of, at that stage, the Ponderland farmers, who obviously, some of them would have criminal records, I submitted extensive comments to say it just, and many other people in the industry did, to say it can't work like that. You're excluding the people that have this knowledge. So they actually then amended the prohibition. So you can only, pretty much as in any industry, if you're not qualified in law to be a director because you've been removed from an office of trust or you've committed a serious offense, then that would be a bar to enter the cannabis industry, but much like any other industry. So to answer your question, then there is no prohibition against people with criminal records for cannabis joining the legal industry.
Amen. All right, we're going to try. We got a couple of questions, so we want to try to do them kind of rapid fire. If you would say your name and question, please.
My name is Sunshine Blow.
That's great. That is fantastic. I apologize. Please continue.
I'm a lay person, and I'm actually listening carefully to my learned colleagues within the legal fraternity, and looking into our own situation in South Africa. Won't it be prudent? We have the bar councils in the country. Is it not possible for the bar councils to begin to look at the different laws that regulate from your food, your medicine, and other laws, so that you as the bar council people that understand the law could empower the legislators, whom in majority of the cases are not lawyers themselves, so that when they repeal or amend the current legislation in Parliament, they have the benefit of your legal expertise.
There we go. We already got legal infrastructure. Why not use it?
Is it Sunshine?
Yeah, man. Sunshine Bloom, even. Come on. And he's a doctor.
I'm Africa
Sunshine.
without the South. So, look, it's traditionally in South Africa, and you must appreciate this, and we need to, it's not that we, as private sector lawyers, can walk into the government buildings and tell them, listen here, this is what's happening out here, and this is how it should be. It doesn't work like that. They've got their own, as you know, the state law advisor, who is responsible for drafting legislation. And I think with my engagement, obviously following what is happening to the potential draft bill, this is not the easiest bill I think they have been confronted with. Exactly for the reason because it cuts across such a lot of various areas of the law. And in addition to that, and we've heard it this morning as well, the various interests in this area is also so diverse. So they've got a very difficult, it's not the easiest job, I would think. On the other hand, they can also take a very narrow approach and say, but it still remains regulated within the framework of the Medicines Act and the Drugs Act, because it remains presumably so. And we still have our international treaties to comply with, unfortunately. So from where I sit is, as a regulatory lawyer, if I were to draft that piece of legislation, I'm constrained because we still have our international treaties.
All right, sorry, I just want to interrupt for the last question here. And yeah, thanks, Yuan. All right, name and question, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Zweni. I'm a grower in Pondoland of cannabis. When looking at the current regulations for licensing, I find that almost all of us, the growers in Pondoland, we're not fitting there. My question is, as a panel, can you have influence on the government regulators to have a model which will accommodate us? We're actually excluded.
Help a brother out.
Thanks for that question, Pecha. Greek always want to ask the important questions. Well, look, Greek, as you know, it's not about government lowering the bar to include Amapondo farmers. The bar that has been set is the GMP bar. So it's more about them developing standards that include the rural farmers. And that is the exciting and engaging debates that we're having with government. So they've opened up a channel of communication and asked for assistance to develop standards, working with various other different government bodies that develop standards for other industries to develop a basic yet effective standard to include the rural farmers of cannabis in this country in any industry. And something that it comes from civil society, and I must give the credit to Fields Green for all, but it's something that we've taken to the Amapondo farmers as well, and it's something that they really believe in, that there'll be nothing about us without us. And that's it.
There we go.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much. Charles Feldmann, Ricky Stone, Rodney